There are stories that begin with loud moments, but Elias Ramos' story began in silence. A silence so deep that it felt almost sacred. In a small coastal town in the Philippines, where the evenings were painted with soft orange skies and the sound of waves brushing against the rocks, Elias lived a life that looked ordinary from the outside. But hidden behind that quiet life was a voice the world had never heard, a voice that carried sorrow, hope, and something golden. Elias grew up in a simple wooden house near the shore. Life was not easy, especially after losing his father at a young age. He learned early how to work hard, how to smile even when his heart felt heavy, and how to carry responsibilities that felt larger than his small frame. His mother, Rosa, often watched him with eyes full of love and worry, knowing that life had forced him to grow faster than most children. Yet, despite the challenges, Elias found comfort in music. At night, when the world around him softened and the streets grew quiet, he would climb onto the rooftop and let his voice drift into the sky. The stars felt like the only audience he deserved, because he believed no one else would care to listen. His voice carried warmth, a deep softness that echoed the emotion of every song he sang. But he kept this gift hidden, afraid of being judged, afraid of being laughed at, afraid of dreaming too big. His friend Michael was one of the few who truly understood him. Michael had grown up beside him, sharing the same dusty paths and broken sandals. He knew Elias carried something powerful inside him, something that went beyond their small town. And every time Elias sang, Michael felt the world pause for a moment, as if listening. Elias did not know what destiny had planned for him. He did not know that every note he sang in solitude was shaping a future that waited far beyond the shores of his town. He only knew one thing: some dreams feel too heavy to claim, especially when life teaches you to expect little. But even the softest voice can become impossible to ignore when it carries truth. Days passed quietly for Elias, each one blending into the next like soft waves rolling onto the shore. He woke before sunrise, worked long hours at the small seaside restaurant, and returned home tired but grateful. Life was predictable, safe, humble, and far from the noise of the world. But destiny rarely knocks with noise. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, disguised as something ordinary. One evening, while Elias wiped down the empty tables after closing time, his phone vibrated with a notification. He ignored it at first, thinking it was nothing important. But when he finally checked it, he froze. A video of him singing, a video he didn't know even existed, had been posted online. It was Michael's doing. His friend had secretly recorded him singing on the rooftop weeks ago and uploaded it, believing the world deserved to hear that voice. At first, Elias felt panic. His heart raced as he scrolled through comments from strangers across the world. People he had never met were calling him Filipino Elvis, praising his tone, his emotion, the raw honesty in his voice. Each message felt unreal, like a dream too fragile to touch. He wished he could hide, but the world had already found him. By the next morning, the video had traveled far beyond their small town. Elias felt overwhelmed, as if the life he knew was sliding out from under him. But beneath that fear was a small spark, a feeling he had almost forgotten. Hope. Michael encouraged him gently, telling him that maybe this was the chance he never dared to take. America's Got Talent had an open audition window. The idea felt impossible, too big for someone like him. But when he looked at his mother, silently watching him from across the room with eyes full of prayers, something inside him shifted. Maybe dreams weren't meant to be hidden forever. Maybe they waited for the right moment to rise. With trembling hands and a heart caught between fear and faith, Elias decided to try. Not because he believed he could win, but because for once, he wanted to see where the road might lead. A door had opened. And even if he didn't knock, it was meant for him. The journey to America felt like stepping into another world. For the first time, Elias sat on a plane, watching clouds pass like soft mountains beneath him. Everything felt surreal, the roaring engines, the strangers speaking different languages, the quiet tremble in his hands. But he reminded himself that this moment wasn't an accident. It was a road he never asked for, yet it had opened for him anyway. When he arrived in Los Angeles, the city felt enormous. Skyscrapers stretched toward the sky like giant reminders of how small he truly was. The streets buzzed with energy, lights, crowds, and dreams far louder than anything he had ever known. He carried only a small suitcase, a worn jacket, and the weight of his mother's hope. The day of the America's Got Talent audition arrived with a mix of nerves and silence. Backstage, performers glittered with confidence. Some wore rhinestone suits, others had bright makeup and wild hairstyles. They practiced moves, stretched, and laughed loudly. Elias stood among them like a gentle shadow, simple clothes, humble presence, quiet eyes. He felt out of place, like someone who had stepped onto the wrong stage. The judges' voices echoed from the auditorium. Their comments, their laughter, the crowd's reactions, everything seeped through the walls. Elias felt his heartbeat rise. His legs felt heavy. His palms dampened with nervousness. For a moment, he wondered if he should walk away, return home, and forget this dream that seemed far bigger than him. But then he remembered how he used to sing alone under the night sky, without fear, without expectations. He remembered the video that changed everything, the voice that came from a place deeper than his doubts. Finally, his name was called. He walked onto the massive stage, the spotlight cutting through the darkness and landing on him like a sudden weight. The judges looked at him with amused curiosity. Some audience members whispered, expecting a simple impersonation, maybe even something silly. A few quietly laughed at the title, Filipino Elvis. Elias felt the laughter. He felt the doubt. But he also felt something rising inside him, a quiet strength he never knew he had. He closed his eyes. He took a slow breath. And he began to sing. The first note that left Elias' lips did not just fill the room, it transformed it. In an instant, the laughter softened. The whispers died. A hush spread through the arena like a gentle wave settling over restless water. His voice carried a warmth that felt both familiar and new, like the echo of an old memory suddenly awakening. It was rich, deep, and touched with the unmistakable spirit of Elvis, yet it was undeniably his own. The spotlight that once felt heavy now wrapped around him like a quiet embrace. Each note flowed from a place inside him that had waited years to be heard. The world around him blurred into a soft haze, and only the music remained, the music and the story he had carried for so long. As he sang, the memories of his life surfaced in gentle flashes. The nights on the rooftop under stars. The soft sound of waves reaching the shore. His mother watching him with quiet pride. A father he barely remembered. The weight of dreams he once hid. Each emotion shaped the rise and fall of his voice, turning the song into something more than a performance. It became a confession, a release of everything he had held inside. The judges, who moments ago wore playful smiles, now watched him in stunned silence. One leaned forward, eyes shining with disbelief. Another covered their chest as if steadying a heartbeat that had stumbled. The crowd, standing shoulder to shoulder, felt the shift too. Some wiped their eyes, surprised by how deeply the voice of a stranger could reach them. Others simply stood still, overwhelmed. Back home in the Philippines, Rosa sat in front of the television, hands trembling. The image of her son, small, humble, nervous, now stood tall on one of the world's biggest stages. Tears gathered in her eyes as she realized that the voice she always believed in was finally touching millions. Elias reached the final note with a power he didn't know he possessed. The arena erupted. People rose to their feet in a wave of astonishment and admiration. The same stage that once felt too big for him now felt exactly where he belonged. He had come as a quiet dreamer. But he stood there now as someone the world could no longer ignore. When the last note faded, the applause rose like a storm breaking open the sky. It washed over Elias, powerful and overwhelming, yet strangely gentle at its core. For a moment, he simply stood there, breathing in the sound. It didn't feel like praise, it felt like acceptance, like the world was finally listening to the voice he had kept hidden for so long. The judges stood in awe, their expressions filled with something deeper than surprise. It was respect. It was admiration. It was the realization that greatness often comes from the places no one thinks to look. And as the audience continued cheering, Elias felt tears gather in his eyes, not from pride, but from the quiet relief of knowing he had finally faced the fear that lived inside him. That night, the performance traveled across the world in seconds. Millions watched the clip on their phones, their laptops, their televisions. Some watched out of curiosity, others out of nostalgia for Elvis, but they all stayed for the same reason: the authenticity in Elias' voice, the raw emotion, the honesty that touched something human in everyone who heard him. In his small town in the Philippines, people gathered outside their homes, celebrating with pride. Neighbors who had known Elias since he was a boy now spoke of him with glowing faces. His mother wept softly, holding her hands to her chest as if trying to steady a heart overflowing with joy. She had always known her son carried something special, and now the world finally saw it too. When Elias returned home weeks later, the airport was filled with people waiting to greet him. Children waved small Philippine flags. Families cheered his name. Yet Elias remained the same humble soul he had always been. He smiled shyly, grateful but overwhelmed, still unsure how he had become a symbol of hope for so many. But deep inside, Elias understood something important: the world wasn't celebrating fame. It was celebrating courage. It was celebrating the moment he chose to step beyond fear and let his gift serve others. He didn't chase the spotlight. He simply walked toward a door that opened for him. And in doing so, he reminded the world that greatness can rise from even the quietest hearts. A star had been born, not from confidence, but from humility. A star the world would never forget.